In every generation, there are those who rise to defend liberty. We honor the past by telling the stories of Revolutionary War patriots, celebrating their courage, preserving their memory, and protecting the places they once stood. We serve the present by showcasing civic engagement and community service, supporting veterans, honoring educators, and standing with those who serve. We prepare for the future by inspiring leadership and patriotism in younger generations through education, recognition, and outreach. This is America 250, our Patriots' Legacies, a tribute to freedom, service, and remembrance, presented by the Stephen Holston Chapter, Tennessee Society, Sons of the American Revolution.
Welcome to Episode 7 of Our Patriots' Legacies. I am Mark DeNicola, President of the Stephen Holston Chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution. Today we celebrate a living symbol of American freedom, the Liberty Tree. From its roots in Boston as a rallying point for the Sons of Liberty, the Liberty Tree has stood for hope, resistance, and unity throughout our nation's history. On October 25th, the Stephen Holston Chapter, along with the DAR and CAR, will continue this tradition by planting and dedicating a Liberty Tree at Fort Southwest Point in Kingston, Tennessee. This tulip poplar, grown from the estate of Sergeant Alvin York, will serve as a lasting tribute to the patriots who fought for our independence and to the enduring spirit of liberty in our community. Today's presentation is delivered by Tim Dake, Secretary of the Stephen Holston Chapter, who will guide us through the history, meaning, and future of Liberty Trees, and the significance of our own dedication in honor of America's 250th anniversary. Join us as we honor the legacy of liberty and the patriots who shaped our nation's story on Our Patriots' Legacies.
I got two things to talk about, and I've blended them together tonight. Mark asked me to update everyone on where we're at with the Liberty Tree Project in Roane County, as well as talk a little bit about the history of Liberty Trees and why we picked Fort Southwest Point. So, in the interest of expediency, and I say this because if you were here in May and you heard my extensive travel log on the trip to Lexington Concord, and if you were here in June when I went on almost forever about Bunker Hill, you would understand that it's a very wise thing Mark has done tonight. He's given me a time limit because I can go on and on. So, Liberty Trees. In order to keep this brief, I really wanted to talk about just the Liberty Tree in Boston. This is the one most people are familiar with. And the reason I'm doing that is because there were hundreds of Liberty Trees. Almost everybody had one. And the story behind each one, what went on there, what was done, what happened to it, is a little bit different, but they generally have the same elements. And I think the one in Boston is probably the most typical or representative of what happens with a Liberty Tree. So I'm going to focus on that. So let's start with this. This is a picture done, this was drawn about 1774 of Liberty Tree. I see two here. I don't know which one it is, but I did find this. The land around it is called Liberty Hall because this tree was typically where people would go to complain, to gather and vent and just rabble-rouse or commiserate with each other. Now, the tree was planted in 1646. If you know anything about Boston, how it looked a long time ago, Boston was really an island with a very small spit called Boston Neck coming out to it. At its narrowest point, only wide enough for a road. So Boston was really an island. And when you first would come across the neck, you would come to this grove of elm trees that was planted in 1646. Well, eventually, as time went by and the city grew, and it moved down towards the neck, the grove of elm trees went away and it became a residential area. Now, that was at that time at the intersection of Essex and Orange Street. Orange Street today is called Washington, and it is what was the main road coming over the neck up into the city. So it was considered a symbol for people because that's where they would go and be politically active. So that was their point of resistance, or they were looking for some hope for repeal of Stand Act, something like that. this was the place they went. Now, that meant that the more common people, the wealthier types, your John Hancocks, that sort of thing, they would go rant and rave at Faneuil Hall or, go down to the Green Dragon or something like that. So, political gatherings. First time this tree was used was really to protest the Stamp Act in August of 1765, and this was done by the Sons of Liberty, who had formed pretty much in response to the Stamp Act. The whole idea that Parliament could claim the right to tax without representation became their theme. No taxation without representation come from them. But there was a forerunner group called the Loyal Nine, and they really pushed on this issue that they had to object to this tax. So they would call people to come and gather at the tree. Now, what they did, if you look in the picture here, this is from the time, you'll see it says Liberty Tree. That's because there was a copper plaque put on the tree to identify it, just so no one could mistake it at that time. Now, I got to think about it, a copper plaque. Where would you get a copper plaque in Boston at that time? Well, maybe somebody that worked in copper or pewter or silver, possibly. A silversmith might have made that. So the first time the tree was used, they hung an effigy in the tree of Lieutenant Governor Andrew Oliver. It only had an AO on it. And they did that deliberately so that they had some plausible deniability. They could say, oh, no, we weren't suggesting we hang the Lieutenant Governor. AO stands for whatever they had. But they did hang it in effigy because not only was he Lieutenant Governor, he was the proposed stamp tax collector. And I have to put proposed in there because after that happened, he decided he really wasn't too interested in that job. It seemed just to be a little too controversial for him. And some of the other things that happened there, the Customs Commissioner's boat, get this, was dragged out of the harbor and dragged the 5 or 6 blocks up to the commons by where the tree was at and burned. How many guys would take it right on land? So the tax collectors, and in this picture here, this is John Melvin. This is a famous picture. This is, I think it was in the London newspaper. He was one of the first to be tarred and feathered on the tree and then forced to drink tea. What did he drink? I don't know. But it probably wasn't tea because it really made him feel sick. The funeral processions of the victims of the Boston Massacre were brought out that way, deliberately paraded around the tree a few times so the public could get good and incensed and upset about it. The tree was really used a lot for political purposes. And this happened everywhere else. When people saw this happening in Boston, other cities said, let's do the same thing. Well, let's have us a Liberty Tree, a place where we can agitate. The tree wasn't there that long, unfortunately. It was more than 100 years old by the time it was used for political purposes. But in August of 1775, when the Loyalists were still in control of the city, at that time, we're after Lexington and Concord, but before Evacuation Day, and the Loyalists and the British Army was in control, the British decided this thing was too much of a symbol, and it had to come down. So they chopped it down, chopped it up, turned it in, I believe it was 14 cords of wood, which they used then for their fires to keep the places where the British soldiers were staying. They thought that was probably the best way to insult patriots, particularly the Sons of Liberty. And I want to point out this picture here. The reason I picked this is this monument is on the side of a building near where it stood. And we're going to get to that in a minute, but this has been there since about 1850. Today, it's the Registry of Motor Vehicle building. I believe it's been used for a lot of things, and it's still there. It's 3 stories up, and people forgot it was there. And in fact, for most of the 1900s, there was a billboard in front of it. And when someone pointed out it was there and that this should be respected and should be visible, the governor of Massachusetts went and got a ladder to climb up there to see, was it really behind there? Because it had been so long since anyone had seen it, they didn't even know it was there anymore. So when it was taken down, there was a stump left. So then everybody started using the stump as a platform for their political speeches, and it became called Liberty Stump. Now, the British quickly realized they made a mistake. When they took control of Charleston, not only did they chop down the tree in Charleston, South Carolina, they made sure to burn the stump so they wouldn't have a Liberty Stump there. All right, more than 150 lanterns were put in this tree to celebrate when the stamp tax was repealed and to light liberty. And to this day, one of those lanterns still exists. It's in the old State House. I've seen it. So, Commemorating the tree then and now. I'm not going to try to read this, but this is one of 6 stanzas. Thomas Paine, yes, he of common sense, wrote a song about liberty trees. He didn't catch on very well. It was apparently hard to sing. And you can see, here is that plaque. This is a picture from 1908. At that time, it was a very commercial center. By the 1960s through 1990s, this was Boston's red light district. Today, this is what you have. That plaque would be over on this building over here, and this is across the street. This is all that is left of where the Liberty Tree was today. This kind of grimy looking little monument that was put in 2018. There is, where you can't see, but behind here, there is a plaque set into the ground with a picture of the tree, tells a little bit of the story about it. But that's it. That is all that is left of it. Now, once the tree was gone, and you had only Liberty stump left, people decided they still needed to be able to hang effigies up to burn them and to fly flags, so they put up a Liberty pole, which they found was a lot easier to both replace and to use, and it was easy for other people to copy. So that became the next thing, Liberty poles. That's it. Here's a guy in effigy in the same spot where they would run him up there and then they would burn it. These were then all over everywhere. Now today, there are a few Liberty trees still left. Most over the last 250 years have died or something's happened. Like the biggest, most famous one after Boston was probably the one in Annapolis. This thing was massive. Most of them were elm trees, specifically Princeton elms. And the one in Maryland in 1999 was destroyed by Hurricane Floyd. So now what is considered to be the oldest still standing tree dating from the Revolution is in Randolph, New Jersey, and it dates to 1720. So there are still a few left. So now we come to Roane County and what we're doing with that. So why do we want to do this? If you remember, the SAR has said that they want to see at least 250 trees planted by the next July 4th, and they would love to have one in every state. And the criteria they're giving is have one planted in a county or a city named for a Rev War vet. Well, there's, depending on what source you use, anywhere from 3,144 to 3,289 counties, parishes, boroughs, or county equivalents in the United States, of which 475 are named for Revolutionary War veterans or patriots. So, Roane County is named for Archibald Roane. If you're not a native Tennessean, you might not know this, he's the second governor. But he was also a member of the Lancaster County Militia in Pennsylvania. He was with Washington crossing Delaware. He was at the Battle of Trenton. He was at Yorktown. He was one of the delegates to Tennessee's Constitutional Convention to draft its first state constitution, judge on the Supreme Court, Southwest Territory owner. So he has no small list of achievements. And we thought we should have a Liberty Tree in Roane County. Now, this is what? This is the site. This here little white flag is going to be where our tree is. And I picked Fort Southwest Point, but I got to thinking about what would be the logical place in Roane County. There's not a lot of big cities there, but Kingston has a good history. Fort Southwest Point was originally built in 1797 and used until 1811. The city of Kingston is there because it was there to support the fort. But it doesn't date to the Revolution. However, it's very close to it. The soldiers that manned that fort were still wearing the same uniform in 1797 that was ordered by Collier General James Meade in 1779. They hadn't changed yet. So, if you go out there wearing the typical uniform of militia thing, you're period correct, or historically correct. And if you haven't been out there, you can see this is on a hill. There's a very large hill where the Clinch and the Tennessee rivers come together, and this fort dominated it. At the time that fort was in operation, 1/4 of the American Army was stationed at that fort. And the whole idea of that was to protect the frontier, but most importantly, to protect the Cherokee that lived on the other side of the Clinch River from American settlers coming in and taking their land. Now, there was a road designated so they could get to Nashville, but if you look at an old map from that period, you had 2 settlement areas. You had East Tennessee, and then you had around Nashville, and everything else in between belonged to the Indians. So they spent most of their time, and this is why a quarter of the Army was there, protecting that road, making sure settlers kept on their way to Nashville and didn't stop and take Cherokee land because the Cherokee would get very upset with them. So because it's on a hill and it's cleared off, this is a great spot to put a tree. This parking lot where you come right down to the end, you're looking up at the fort on the hill, museum's over to this side. The fort asked that we not put in a Princeton elm. That is what the SAR is recommending all across the country you use. But these guys wanted a tulip poplar because it is the state tree. And we thought this was a good idea, and having talked with Mark, had a great suggestion of a place we found over in Lebanon, Tennessee, that has got special trees. And unfortunately, they were out of all tulip poplars, but when I explained what we were wanting to do, they said, we will make sure we can get one. Apparently, the DAR chapter over there is doing a huge project that involves a lot of trees, and they bought all of them up. But they were gracious enough to say, for what you guys are doing, we'll give up one of our trees. That tree comes from a seedling of a plant that is growing on the estate of Sergeant Alvin York here in Jamestown. So I thought that's kind of a neat little tie. It has some historical quality to it, being a state tree as well. So where we're at is that the marker is going to cost us about $375, tree's about $200, so we've got about $575 into this. We're going to dedicate this August 25th because that is the Fall Festival in Kingston. This park is going to be crawling with people. They're holding much of it there. It's going to have a really good audience, and it's a chance to educate a lot of people about Liberty trees, about the Revolution, this sort of thing. This is the proposed wording. I talked to people at Maryville Monument about this, and I told them that we're going to take a look at this tonight. Hopefully you guys will all be happy with it, and I can tell them go ahead tomorrow and start making it. But this is what we're proposing. So this is your chance to object and propose something better. This is what Mark and I talked about. I think I sent you a half a dozen ideas, and we thought this would make the most sense. Comments? Criticisms?
Looks good.
Should we go ahead with it?
Yes.
All right, well, good. I like the idea of this because it's generic enough that we could do this elsewhere. Is part of where we're going. So here's where the project stands. And I put the quote up here, what they said to use as criteria. To date, and there's a website for this, and I looked at it as of yesterday, 26 states have planted trees. Just half. Tennessee is among them. They would like to see, the National Society would like to see a tree in each state by next July 4th. That's going to be tough. There's been 162 trees planted today of the 475 potential counties. But their goal is at least 250 counties by next July 4th. So they're right around 2/3 the way there. Now, so we get to Tennessee. Only 3 of the 24 chapters in the state, including our own, has taken on doing this. All the trees planted so far, here there's only 4 of them, have been planted in West Tennessee. 3 of those by the Isaac Shelby chapter, one by James Madison. So Isaac Shelby has another one pending, and we have one. So Tennessee's kind of slacking a little bit here, but at least we're starting to get into the game. So here's where we're at. I got to get the tree here from Lebanon. Anybody want to do a road trip? Preferably you got an SUV. If it's 6 to 7 foot tall tree, we want to keep it out of the wind. Okay, the marker wording said acceptable. So we come down to, and Mark, I know you have some ideas about what time to start this. They've got another show going on, a comedian or something at the amphitheater. When you go down the hill to the Clinch River, there's an amphitheater there. Mark's talking about beforehand. Maybe we just piggyback. You already got a captive audience. When we come on stage right after them and do our thing. So we've looked. There is no set ceremony for one of these trees. Apparently, every chapter does their own thing. So we're free to come up with our own ceremony. What do we think would be the best thing to do? I had a couple ideas in that. I think one would be obviously to talk a little bit about Liberty trees. Maybe one person takes that for a few minutes. Another one would be talk about why Archibald Roane, his history, and then how do we advertise this? And then I put in red what I think is the most important question. What about the other 5 counties in the area that we serve? Now, 4 of those are named for Rev War veterans. Loudon's not, but Chuck's not here today. Chuck Green pointed out Lenore City is named for General William Lenore, so that meets the criteria of the SAR. So my thought is, we already know what to do. We should go all out and do all of our counties. Comment? Ideas? Argue with me? Oh, good goal. I think we could do it. Especially if we get the first one done. Now we've got a pattern, we could just go with that. Yeah, by July 4th of next year, I think we could easily get all 6 of our counties done. And I think we could do it well.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube at Stephen Holston Chapter. And friend us on Facebook. Just search Stephen Holston. See you next time as we honor our Patriots' legacies.